Hi and welcome back to the next video from the real-time chat app series with Nest.js and Angular. This is video number 5, where we mainly deal with Angular and the login form with JWT Authentication. So we are creating a login form with Angular reactive forms to validate the email and the password. Then we make a request against our backend. We save the JWT that we get from our backend to our local storage in the browser. Implement the authentication guard for protected routes in our application that checks if our JWT is not expired and if it is even existing in our local storage. And we also attached a JWT to every request that we make against our backend so that we can authenticate against it. Then we have here our structure for this video as always. So first we have a look at the video outcome, then we read our user story for this, and then we implement the user story and close it. So let's have a short look at the outcome of this video. So you can see here we have like a login form. We can go to register form that we made in the last video. We can go back to login. We can not access our private dashboard. So for this we need a valid JWT, and you see you get then redirected to the login page. If we now log in with the right credentials, and this here is also validated. So if you have something else that is not like an email, then it says email must be valid. And then you can hit login, and then you get from our backend our token back. So the JWT token here, the access token, and we are saving this to our local storage as NestJS chat key. And with this, you are able now to access our private route, so the dashboard. So now our authentication guard checks if our JWT token is expired or not. If it is not expired, you are able to access this route. And also if you remove it here and if you reload the page, then it redirects you again back to the login page. And if you have it stored in your local storage, and you make like another request, so it's now attached to every request that you make. So if you, for example, which is totally silly, but for this it should work, it should always be attached. So you can see here, we now attach it as an authorization token directly to our request automatically. So all the requests that we later make in our private module are automatically validated by there's automatically added the JWT token so that we can authenticate against our backend. So let's have a short look at our story here for video number 5 for Angular user login with reactive forms and JWT saving. So our story is basically, as a user, I want to be able to log in to the app with my credentials, so with my email and my password. The input data should be validated, of course. And when my provided data was correct, then the returned JWT token, of course, from our NestJS backend, should be saved into our local storage on our browser. And the authentication guard that we already have, that is at the moment always returning false, for this private route should be updated so that it now checks if there's like a JWT in our local storage that is not expired. So basically, we now make a login form. We get a response from our backend back with the JWT token. We want to save this token in the local storage of our browser so that we can always access it. And with the package, I think from OAuth, Angular JWT, we can check if the token is expired or not. And so if there's a token in our storage and it is not expired, then we can, with the auth guard, allow everyone to access our private space. And if there's no valid JWT, then we deny it, as far as we at the moment also do. And then we can go on with this, and we also want to, with every request that we make against our backend, want to send the JWT token, because you remember when we try to get all our users, we need to provide a JWT token because we need to authenticate ourselves against our backend. So we can add this to our acceptance criteria. so that we have now the criteria login form with reactive forms. So we want to make login form with Angular reactive forms. We want to save the JWT in our local storage when we log in. We want to update our authentication guard to check for the expiration of the JWT and if it's there. And we want to send the JWT token on every request that we make against our backend so that it knows who we are, because there's everything attached and it is decrypted. So we can then start very easily. The first thing that we can do is we can go to npm Angular JWT. And this is what we want to use, so that we even can use. And first we can install it here. So we cd into our front-end folder, and then we just install it here. And then we can read a bit through it. So this library has provides a norm HTTP interceptor, which automatically attaches our JSON Web Token to every request with HTTP client from Angular, so that we don't need to make a custom HTTP interceptor. So normally you would make an HTTP interceptor, you would get the token from your local storage, and then copy and paste the whole request and add the bearer, so the JWT token to it, so that you can authenticate against the backend. But this will do it automatically for us. And for this, we just need to install it, what we just did. And then we can also start our Docker stuff. And then we could also use it here standalone, but we can also inject this into our app module. Here, the JWT module for root, we can make a token getter. This is just a function where we access our local storage, and then we can, in our local storage, we can set or get an item. So you can see it here, they are always two value pairs. So if we go for our local storage here and look it up for here, for example, then you always have a key value pair. And then you can access it with a name. So we could name this here whatever we want. And then on login, we have to make local storage.set item, set our JWT token and name it, for example, then access token. And then this should work. We can say allowed domains. For us, it would be, I think, localhost 3000. Disallowed routes we won't need for this. And then if you have JWT in your local storage, it will always be attached for all your requests. We can check this later also. And we can also make great use of the here expired. So this JWT helper service will check if your token is expired or there and just return a Boolean. So for example, if it is expired, then it says true. If it is not expired, it says false. If it is not finding a token in your local storage, that is named like you named it here, and it also returns true. And so with this we can very easily build our authentication guard. So we now have to wait till everything here is installed, but we can already go into our front end here with another terminal. So we cd into our front end, and we can generate our work in our login form. So remember, in the last video we made our register form here with email, username, password confirmation, and submit. And for this we have a very basic form. And if you click on register, you make a request against our backend with our user service. And if everything is correct, you navigate to the login page so that you could now log in. And here we have some getters for all the form controls from our form. So we can start, because we already have everything in our public module here. We have the metcard module, reactive forms module, everything imported. So we can directly start with our login form. So we can also name this form, which is from type form group from Angular. And this is a new form group. And then we can say we have here two values, which is email, which is form control, with null, and we have some validators. We can use the built-in validators from Angular, so it is required. And it should be an email, so email pattern. You could always add there some more. And the second one that we want to have is the form control for password. And that is also required. So now we have our form. We can remove the ng on init since we are not using it. So we can save a bit of code. And then we can also remove everything that we had here in our login component. You can have a look if this is finished. No, at the moment not. And then we can actually, to make it a little bit faster, just copy and paste a little bit from our registration component. And just format it. Then we can say here we want to name it register. We want to go to the register page. And then we can also copy and paste some SCSS, or we can just copy and paste all of it. So basically we name this from login to register. And when we have like a container where we make display flex, justify content center, so that we center everything and we have a margin on all sides of 100 pixels. And the min width is 350 pixels. In our met card where we want to display the form, we have also display flex and column direction so that we have all the form fields beneath each other and not in a row. And the form fields have a width of 100% and should minimum be width of 300 pixels. And our button should not be centered or on the left, but to assigned to the end of the line of the row. So it is in its own div, which has a button class. And then we say flex end, so it should be at the end of the row. So then we can have our met card title. So this also comes with met cards. And this should not be named register, but it should be named login. And then we have our met card content, which will be our form. And here we don't need the username field. We don't need the password confirmation field in the login form. But we need our email field and our password field, and this is basically the same. So if our email is touched, so if the user clicked in it or has done something and we have an error required, then we want to display the error email is required, and the same goes if we don't can validate the email. And the second one is the same for password. So if the password is touched and has an error that is required, that is named required, then we say password is required and the form is invalid. So we need now to make the getters for this. So we say get email, and we want to return form control, and then we return this .form .get email as form control. And we do the same for password. So we say get password, and we want to return a form control. My mistake, form control. Then we simply say return this .form .get password as form control. Then we can have like a quick look here. So if we submit our form, we don't want to register, but we want to log in. So we have to create it. And then we can simply say, as before, we only want to execute this if our form is valid. If it's not valid, we don't want to do anything. And then we want to go against our login service, our authentication service, and that we now need to create So we can now have a quick look at our everything worked here. So I think it's now starting up. So with Docker Compose up, and then we can have a quick look if we can see our login page. So let's go to our localhost 4200, and this seems like it's not built right now. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's generating still, so let's wait for it. So our backend is already there, so we can, with Postman, check, for example, that we are able to create a user. So you see we have now created this user. We are not able to get all users because we are unauthorized, but if we log in and provide our valid JWT token, so this is what we want to attach also, like we do it here, then as bearer token to every request. We also want to do this then in Angular, so that we then now authorized and can access all the data. So you see now our Angular application is built, and we can see if we reload, we have here our login form. We can go to register page, we can register a user, and now we can try to log in with our password. And at the moment, nothing should happen because we are not going against the backend with a request, but we go into inside. You see it here. Inside was what we were logging out. Here, if we hit our login function for our form. So this seems to work. We also have here form validation. So this says it must be an email. So now it's okay. And password is also required. So this seems to work good. So now we can go on and make like our authentication service that we need to go against our backend. We could also do this in a user service, but I don't know, I feel like it's better to abstract this into a separate service that we can name authentication service. So for this, we can say Angular generate service, and then we can specify the path. So we are in the public module, we are in services, and then we want to have an auth service. And then you see we have it here. We can make like a new folder for this and name this auth service. And then we have it here. And yeah, basically we are doing here just a post request for login at the moment. Later we can also log out, but this is something that we want to have in our dashboard, so in our private stuff where we are logged in. So we say we need our Angular HTTP client, and we can also use our snack bar from Angular material that we already used in the last video. And then we have here just our login stuff. And here we get like the user, so we need the user password and the user email. And we want to return an observable. And this is from type login response, what we don't have at the moment. So we can copy and paste this since it's both a TypeScript directly from our backend. So we have our interface access token, token type expires in. So this is what we get back here from our login route in our backend. See it here. We get an object back with access token, token type, and expires in. So we can just copy this and add this here to the models and say this is like the login response .ts, and we can actually .interface, and then we can use it. And let's close it all here up a bit. So now we are in our authentication service, and here we want to return an observable from type login response interface. So we can very easily say we want to make a HTTP post request for our login, where we get like a login response interface back. And then we have our base path API /users/login. And then we also provide him in the body the user. And as you remember, we already have here our proxy JSON. When we go against API, we reroute to API 3000, and this API here is our service in our container, so in Docker, so that is linked, so that we have access to it inside this container. So here we can then, for example, pipe this, and then we want to save our login response, our JWT token, to our local storage. So we can very easily say this. First, we have to import our tab from RxJS operators. So this will change nothing in our response. We can just like click in or go into and do something, and then but nothing happens here really. So it's not transforming the response. So we can then say local storage, and we set an item. Now you see we have a key and a value. So the key could be nest.js chat app, and then we have our value is our res.access token. So we want to store our JWT here. And then afterwards we can make another tab where we just display like a little hint for the user that his login was successful. So we can say this.snackbar.open, and then we can copy and paste also a bit from here. So we can say login successful. We can name the button close, and then we can specify like the duration for 2 seconds. Horizontal position is on the right side and vertical position on the top. And then this should be all, I think. And we can save it, and then we can simply access this service in our login component. So here we can, if the form is valid, we can simply say this.service. So we first have to import our out service from our service. And we can also use our private router, so the Angular router, to redirect to the private page if it was successful. So we can simply say here this.offService when we have our login method, and then we have to provide the email and the password. So we can say email is this.email.value. So since we are returning here like the complete form control, we have to access the value, and then we have the same for the password, which is this.password.value. And then we can also make a pipe. We can say tab, and then we can this.router.navigate, and we can go first 2 routes up, then to private, and then to dashboard. And I think we have to import the tab again from RxJS operators. And then we can see if everything compiles here well. So if we now try to log in, we can also open our console here and go to network. So if I give him like a wrong password, we can, and this button should obviously called login. So we rename this button to login. And since our service is like an observable, we have to subscribe to it so it gets hot. and then everything should work. So we can try again. So if we say thomas@thomas.com and we take the password as something wrong, that's not the password, then you see we get 401, so we get unauthorized. Whatever, we get an error. And here we have like now the real password, and then you see we have like a 201 post. And then this should normally redirect us. Yeah, you see it's trying to redirect us. But you remember we have our authentication guard here. That is always returning false, so we are never able to access it, and it's redirecting us before. So you see it here in the routing module, we have this authentication guard applied to the private route, so that we are at the moment not able to access it ever. But we can now check in our local storage if there's set our JWT. And you see it here, we have our key and our value, so like a key value pair. And then we copy this, so our token. We can go to JWT.io. We can like paste it in, and we see we have here our user and the issued at and the expired time. And now we want to make use of this of Angular here, so that we can check if it is expired for our guard, and that we can always send it with every request against our backend. So for this we can very simply, as they said here in the documentation, import the JWT module in our add module. So we say JWT module.forRoot. And I think then we can pass in some stuff. So here we have like a config. And this can be allowed domains. Let's go to localhost 3000. And we have like the token getter. And you can just have a look how they did it. So this is just the export, just a function where they access the local storage, the get item. And we can just place it above here. And then this has to be the same name here as we set it in our authentication service. So we set it as nest.js chat. So this needs to be the same so that it can find it. And we can then simply say here the token getter is the token getter from here. Then we can save it. And then we can see if everything works well. So if everything is being generated from Angular. And so let's have a look at our login page. And then we can say thomas@thomas.com and say password. Then we have our login successful. But we are still not accessing the private route since our guard is still returning false. So now we have to work in our authentication guard. And here we can simply, I think, use the private JWT service that is also from this module. So the JWT helper service. And here we can check if the token is expired. So we can simply say if this.jwt service is token expired. So if it is expired, so if this is true, then we want to navigate, oh, my mistake. To run it again against all the guards. And we want to return false so that you are not able to access this route. And if everything is okay, we want to return true. And you have to see this JWT token expired, so we can just console.log this out is returning like a Boolean value. And if there's no JWT token, then it says also false. But if it says true, then it is expired. If the token is expired, then it says true. Then we say we want to return false. And also, if it is not finding a token, it's also saying it's like true. So we also return false, and we are not able to access it. Otherwise, we get like false, and then we can go to the page. So if we have now a look at our local storage, and we have it saved here, so then we can go to private.dashboard, and then you see now we are on our dashboard page. If I delete my token from my local storage, and if I reload everything, then you see I'm getting redirected back to login. So if I now log in with the correct credentials, and you see my token is being set, and I'm getting redirected to the dashboard. And what we could also do is we could like go into our backend API in our authentication module and just change it here, the expiration time to 10 seconds, just for experimenting purposes. And then you can see if I delete this token here, I reload, I'm getting redirected to login. I can just say again password. Then you see I'm having here my token. If I make a 5, everything works fine. And now after 10 seconds, it should redirect me since the token is then expired. See, now it is expired. And this is, like, I think this is like all we want. So we change this here back in our backend so that we are at 10,000 seconds. And then we can close everything. So then the guard here is, I think, working as expected. So if our token is expired or not there, we get true, and then we go into the if case and we return false so that you're not able to access our private route in our routing module here. But if you're like having a valid token, then you're getting access. And we actually don't need to really check if the token is really the right token from our backend, because for the other requests that we make against our backend, then in the new components in our private module, then we always have to send our JWT. And so if the JWT is from our backend is not being said this is valid or this is from the backend, then they get an error and they can't display anything of data because the backend is not returning anything. So we don't have to worry about this here in this case. And now we can just have a quick look if for our requests this token is always attached, as the documentation here was saying. So now we have here like a token, and this should now for every always if we have like a token in our local storage with this key here, this should be attached to every request that we made. So also to our login request, for example. So we can make this request, and then we can have a look if our post request, and you see it here, we have our authorization, we have our bearer token, and this here is our JWT token from our local storage. So this gets now attached to every request that we make. So now we can like remove, I think we have here like a console log statement somewhere, so we can remove this. And I think now we have like achieved everything that we wanted. So we can check against our story. So we have now a login form with reactive forms created. We are saving our JWT in the local storage. We have updated our authentication guide to check for expiration of JWT and also if a JWT exists. And we send the JWT token on every request. So we can now shut this down and commit all our changes. So we can say git commit git add a, git commit m, we prefix this video 5, and we say edit login form, edit save JWT in local storage, update auth guard to check if JWT is there and not expired, attach JWT to every request against the API. Then we can push it and we can close everything.